What's going on, everybody? Appreciate you tuning in back from the road. Got a chance to check in on my family a little bit here, and now back home and a chance to talk a little bit about what we saw today out of Brian Gregory being introduced as the new general manager of the Suns, and a lot of interesting things to jump into here. It's been another wild week for Phoenix. It's going to be a crazy offseason. This is kind of just the next domino to fall a little bit, but this hire now has kind of been announced for a couple of weeks, a week and a half, somewhere around there, and got a lot of blowback, deservingly so, initially. And I gotta say, I kind of liked him in the interview. I kind of liked him in the presser. He had a little bit of charisma. He had some really honest moments and some good answers, I felt like. There was some bad, but there were a lot of things that I left saying like, okay, like I actually better than I expected, I guess is how I would rate the overall presser. But I thought the very first thing that was really well done was he addressed the elephant in the room. For the last week, ever since this report came out that he's going to be the guy, everybody talked about how this is just, James Jones got kind of the shaft in this whole situation, got blamed for something that really wasn't too much of his fault. And then rather than opening this whole thing up to an actual hiring process, that Gregory gets it simply because Matt Ishbia is his boy, that they both went to Michigan State, that they both have these ties, and that a guy that was underqualified got the job because he knew somebody. Now, would he be the first guy in the history of the world to get that had that happen to him? Absolutely not. In sports, in life, there's a reason they say it's all about who you know. Like, that plays a massive role in you getting these kinds of opportunities. So sure, like if that is the case, he's not the first guy to be put in that, situation, to be given an opportunity for something like that. But he addressed it and said, yeah, like I'm fully aware that that is part of probably how this happens, is that I have this good relationship with him. But then he piggybacks off that and he says, but that's part of the reason why we know this is going to work, is because I have worked with him and have known Ishbia for years, and that we have the same vision, the same plan, the same goals with this team, with the franchise. And because we, and his favorite word, align, that this is going to work out. It's a pretty good selling point. He also then said, it's also not like I haven't been around basketball. I've been involved with basketball for over 30 years and coached and done it at a high level. Just he doesn't have that, the front office resume that you would perhaps want for your GM. But he does have a lot of experience. But I thought it was really good for him to at least get out and acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of people that look at this with a little bit of a side eye. I said, yeah, like that, sure, that played a role. It's not the only factor. I have a lot of other things that I was qualified, but yeah, I'm sure knowing him and us having this rapport played a hand in him feeling comfortable with giving me this opportunity. And I really appreciated the honesty on that. I mentioned that alignment was his favorite word. This is one of the things that I hate on these kind of pressers. This is one of the things that I hate when it comes to kind of introductory little pressers. They seem to, these coaches, these GMs, find like one word and they want to create this whole narrative and make the entire presser done with that. I counted it. This dude said alignment 18 times in his presser. I don't know if I've said alignment 18 times this entire year. I mean, he was rattling it off after every answer, saying how he's aligned with Ishbia and that they're going to find a coach that's aligned with the same vision and move on down and down and down, and everything is aligned and the plan's aligned and the goals aligned. I mean, it got tough. It started feeling very much like you're just getting fed some junk, basically, that he's just throwing out words just to try and sound good and provide a soundbite. But if you actually listen to it, you're like, this is nonsense. Yeah, not one of the brighter spots of the entire presser. But at times, that's people find little crutches to fall back on when they're asked questions and stuff like that. And that seemed to be his. And I felt like that really retracted from a lot of the rest of the presser because it doesn't come off as authentic. When you start doing these where you feed these like liners like he was for a good portion of the presser, you lose people. And he started to lose me right there. He did have, like I said, a few good moments, and there were some pretty direct questions that I got some pretty good answers from him as well, including obviously the biggest thing that his biggest job right now, his number one task that he's going to have to start doing yesterday is start looking for the next head coach and start going over what it's going to take to be there. Now, I mentioned they're going to be casting a huge net, he said. They're going to be exploring all different types of coaches, all different types of backgrounds and experiences, trying to find somebody that fits the exact alignment that they were hoping to and are looking to add to this team, this organization. Now, the big takeaways from it, one, he said there's no timetable, that they're going to make sure that they get this hire right. You would love to have that hire in place before you start getting towards the NBA draft, before you start getting towards NBA Combine, anything like these workouts. You want to have a guy in place that knows what his team has and what he is looking for. He stressed that the things that he wants in this coach is someone who is good at communicating, someone that's a high basketball IQ, someone that matches the style and build that they envisioned for this team. And he didn't really dig into too much what that meant. He just wanted somebody that fit kind of the scope of what they wanted for this team. But the big thing that he hit on, and this is when I found really interesting, he touched on those last points, and then he would get to something and he would start hammering it. And it felt very much like this is what we were missing, and this is not going to happen again. And it became clear they want a coach that's going to hold players accountable. They want a coach that's going to make them play hard and somebody that is going to force them to have some effort and credibility on the court. I think, and it was brought up by Ishbia several times in their presser, I honestly think they're pretty embarrassed by the lack of effort that they saw from this team throughout the year. And frankly, the quit that they saw a lot from them. And their number one objective, all that right there speaks to, is building the culture of this entire franchise again. And they want a coach that can come in that is going to put his foot down, because it starts with them, the front office, and works its way down. That's where the culture begins. And there was a massive culture problem with this franchise last year. And he just said pretty blatantly, that's done. If this is what we are looking for in a coach, we are saying that the days of this culture problem are going to be over, that we're going to find a new guy to come in that is going to set the pace, and then we're going to have a roster filled out around him that is going to either follow or those guys are moving on as well. He also stressed the importance of player development, which I really hope is basically a sign of the times where he's talking about done. And he's talking about some of these guys that were on the roster that were very, very, very talented rookies that could have helped this team out. And yet he didn't. Last year, Coach Bud just would banish those guys to the bench. They disappeared forever. And I don't know if he looked at them and said, we just wasted a year with these guys if we didn't develop them or whatnot. But he made it clear that part of this team's growth in this plan is not just to make trades and to bring in guys and to sign guys in free agency, that he wants, and as he said several times, they want to draft their guys, they want to develop their guys, that is a key component for what this team's going to do in the future. Now, you got to have some draft picks. Last time I checked, they ain't got many of those left. They made a lot of trades and gave off a lot of the farm to try and put this roster together. And he acknowledged the fact that it is very, very talented and it wildly underachieved last year, and that they need to find a system that's going to work well and make all these guys click and mesh. And that is also a big piece of what they're looking for in a coach that knows how to kind of make these guys go together and kind of work together. But he also wants to bring in guys and develop them here in-house, not just go out and try and add pieces in the free market or trade for guys. And that's something they've hit in the draft with some young guys. They just didn't give them reps on the court. They didn't really give them an opportunity to develop too much. And that statement and how much he went back and kept hammering that home tells me that Gregory wants a coach that's going to come in and let these young guys get some burn and play, and that maybe some of these older guys are on the chopping block or on the way out, because it seems very much like he is ready to start shifting gears a little bit and kind of change the culture by letting go of some of the older guys. Not a bad plan. Some would say that's kind of what this team needs. Few other points that really stood out to me on this entire presser. Again, he commented and went back to it several times about how talented he thought this roster was, how he didn't think that it was nearly as bad as they ended up being this season, and they're not nearly as far away as that record would suggest. I don't know if I agree with that, in that I think they have talent, but I think there are some glaring holes, and I don't know what their options are to fix them. The Bradley Beal thing is going to hover over this team for a couple of years now left, and you still have to figure out what to do with Kevin Durant. They don't have the ancillary pieces around them to try and make some more moves. It's limited on this roster. And so when you say it's talented, they have some talented players for sure, but there's so many of these same type of players, and they can only really play one way. The roster is just limited. So I don't know. I'm a little back and forth on how I feel about that one. He really hammered home again about how important it was. This team needs to be known as somebody with grit that plays every night, that he wanted it so that when fans left, that they talked about how this team played hard, and that was what their big takeaway was, whether they won or lost, that they were proud of what they saw on the court. Made it pretty clear fans had a reason and were not proud of what they saw this past year. And they shouldn't have been. It was pretty tough to watch in a very, very, very good portion of the season. Finished really, again, hammering home culture, accountability, and identity. And those are all the things we harped on here towards the end of the season, talking about this team that they were missing, whether it was lacking from Coach Bud, whether it was lacking from the players themselves. There was not nearly enough accountability, drive, competitive spirit from this team for months. And once they got punched in the mouth, it felt like this team just quit last year. And it very clearly sounds like he is wanting to get whatever that losing mentality was that this team had out of the building. It's going to take some work. Those things linger. So you got to bring in a lot of new blood. They've done in the front office. Now they are probably going to have to do it with some players. And speaking on that, the last thing he said, which was very, very interesting, he was asked specifically if he thought that KD and Booker will be a part of this team next year, and he did not give a definitive statement about whether or not they would be. He said he doesn't really like talking about contracts and stuff with players or potential trades, that a lot of those things are just rumors, and that right now he just looks at this roster as being talented. He did mention, and at the end of the year, Booker made it really clear that he was unhappy with the way things were going with the franchise, and he wanted to have a more active role in everything. And he made clear that he believes that he will, that he's talked with him and that they have a good relationship, and that he understands that Booker has a voice at that table. He's been a part of the franchise for a long time. He's a guy that has won at almost the very highest level, got them there to the finals. And so now, if he wants to try and exercise some of his power and kind of control a little bit of this roster in this franchise, sounds like he's going to have a voice, if nothing else, about kind of some of the decisions. And that's a significant thing for Booker as well. That's when you start becoming the real franchise player, is when you have some say on the franchise. Now, KD's the interesting one because the reports keep going back and forth that they're going to keep him, they're going to move him. He was not committal to keeping him either. I can't imagine that they are going to, but he left the door open. And I think I would still say it's a 95% chance he's out the door and that you've got to go out and get some pieces for him. But I would not expect him to be moved before they get the new head coach in play. The next head coach is going to be the very next piece, the next domino to fall. After that, it'll probably be KD, but they don't want to move KD before they have a head coach in play because they want that coach to have some say in the pieces that they are bringing back into the roster. That's an important role to make sure that it fits his system. And if they decide, the coach hire will also give you somewhat of an insight if there's any chance that they decide they want to keep KD, because if they go with some young guy, that's some system where they're going to clearly want to press, restart, gives you the idea. If they hire someone that has had experience that maybe they look at and they're trying to make one last push, that they think the window's not closed and they want to keep KD, which is what some of the reports say, you're probably going to see a more veteran guy that has had some success at some point. Those guys don't typically want to be a part of rebuilds. But it's kind of rebuild time for this team. So overall, like I said, I really liked a lot of the things that he had to say. I thought he was genuine with a lot of stuff and very honest. It just felt like at times he kind of fell back to giving kind of the spoon-fed answers, and he had kind of these really repetitive things that he would say that just got kind of nauseated, and you kind of you lose people at that point. But better than I expected. Self-aware. There's a lot of value in that. So now, the Bucks in his court. It's time for him to show what he can do, because he's about to do the most important thing that his job is, which is hiring the head coach. After that, you start deciding what to do with this roster, but this is going to be, the next hire is the biggest hire. And we'll have a better idea about where this team thinks they really are based off of that hire. He's got to get to work. They got to get this pick in, this coach in here soon, because they don't have all the time in the world to play with. Get that hire, figure out what to do with KD, and go from there. But they got a lot of tough decisions left to make this summer. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what they do, though.